Great. Who else showed their hand for tenants? Because I just think it's so unique. Most of the time I talk to airport managers, like, what are you doing celebrating your tenants? They're a pain in the butt. Anyone else have their hand up over on this side? Gladys? Sorry, Gretchen. Tenant Appreciation Day? Okay, great. So you're not going to walk away knowing how to host an airport event. That's not what this session is about. If you want to really know how to host an airport event, you should probably get signed up with ICAS and start going to their conferences on an annual basis for like a large air show. You get much more insight into that. This is an hour-long session. We're just going to give you tidbits, best management practices that we've experienced throughout the years. And so we're going to go just a little bit more in depth and introduce ourselves a little bit more. Up here on the screen, you can see Mr. Chris Eads, and he's from AOPA, and he conducts the AOPA regional fly-ins. So we'll get to him in just a second. So I manage the Salinas Municipal Airport, and my airport is home to the California International Air Show. And it's a medium-sized air show. Every year we have some sort of jet demonstration team, so we're having to deal with the nuances of working with the jet demonstration team, working with the FAA, to get our waivers, setting up our air show boxes, so it's pretty unique. I also host a large, by large I mean 1,000 car show for people to show up. This year we'll be hosting Relay for Life, which is a benefit for the American Cancer Society, so that's bringing in a bunch of the local businesses from the region, introducing them to our airport, and American Cancer Society is using our facility to raise money for their organization. And then we have like food and wine festivals for Chamber of Commerce, so lots of stuff going on. I've been in the business for about 20 years, and I probably, if I could count them up, I probably have somewhere around 35 to 40 large events that I participated on, because my airport has 2 events a year, so I'm getting 2 events that I'm having to plan for. And then when I worked for the county of San Bernardino, we had 2 airports that were doing air shows every year. So 5 years with them, and that's easily 10 air shows that I participated in. And then working for LA County Airport System, a whole nother airport system. So lots of experience running events. So that's my background. Sean?
All right. Again, I'm Sean. I'm the assistant airport manager for the Livermore Municipal Airport. Pretty sizable GA airport just east of the San Francisco Bay Area. And we host one large airport event every year. It's the first Saturday of October. It's our annual airport open house and air show. We typically draw about 9,000 to 11,000 people during our 5 to 7 hour event, and we've typically gone between 1 or 2 air shows throughout the day. We kind of spread them out pretty evenly. We gather all of our tenants that want to come and display their aircraft out on the ramp. We have between 3 and 4 aircraft that'll do aerial demonstrations. We also bring out some of our local vendors from the community. Livermore is known for its wine country. We have about 50 plus wineries in the region, so one of our big draws is that we invite the Livermore Valley Wine Growers Association to come on out and have tasting booths, which is always drawing out a big several food trucks that come on out. It's just a great event to celebrate what our airport is to the community, the benefits that we have, to provide any outreach and opportunities for our youth that don't necessarily get to see an airport up close and get that much access. You don't see that at your large commercial airport sometimes. All right, so I'm going to talk really loud. Oh, nope. Oh, and now I'm not. The microphone's working again. So it's a huge successful event. The city has been doing it for 20 plus years. I've been doing it for 2 since I came in. And every year it's an exciting and evolving and ever so changing dynamic that we're faced with in our organization. But at the end of the day, we all walk away with it with a sense of satisfaction and pride, knowing that we we're able to deliver a good quality product to our community, and we send out the right message to the community in the region of what Livermore Airport's about, and the benefits, and that it's here for everybody, not just for, you know, the wealthy 1% in their fancy private jets.
Chris?
All right, well, great to be with you guys. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, everyone say hi to Chris
Oh.
Eads.
Well, great to be with you guys. So I'm the Senior Director of Outreach and Events at AOPA, and I've had the privilege of working with both Brett and Sean to produce AOPA fly-ins at their airports. I think, Brett, we were there in 2015. Sean, we were there in Livermore just last year. And leading the outreach and events programs for AOPA, my role has covered not only the AOPA fly-ins, but a whole wide host of other events at airports. We've done Wings and Wheels events and other types of social programming and so forth at the airport. So we've, over the course of the last 7 or 8 years, probably been a part of about 100 different airport events that we've put together as an association. Of course, we're most well known for the major AOPA fly-ins that we've been doing for 7 years now. First began in 2014 with events. There were about a couple thousand people on a one-day event Saturdays. And then now the events have grown over the years where we're doing about 3 events per year with roughly 2,000 folks coming over 2 days, Friday and Saturday combined events. And so pretty robust programming, and excited to share with you guys any insight we can about airport events.
Hey, Chris, you want to share with them where you are now?
Yeah, so I'm in Casper, Wyoming right now, sitting in the airport manager's office in Casper, Wyoming. We're doing a kickoff orientation planning session for a fly-in we're going to be doing here in June.
So their planning aspect is almost year-round for what they're doing. If you understand, they're going to new airports every year, and so they're already hitting the ground for this summer's events, which I think is pretty unique. So.
Yep.
This is going to be a pretty open session. If you guys have questions along the way, feel free to ask. But I'm going to start it off with a question to both the groups. So you made the pilgrimage to the Great California International Air Show at Salinas, and you see Brett out there working it, and you say, you know what, if Brett can do it, I think I can do it too. So where do you go from there? What are your aspects? So you want to do this event, now what? What's the first step that you guys are thinking about?
My initial, and you know, just the way that is my thought process is I'm kind of thinking, you know, what for my airport, you know, what kind of event do I imagine? What do I kind of want to see, you know, as the ultimate goal? And then as I'm looking down at that, you know, that 50,000-foot view, you know, I'm starting to form other questions. You know, what kind of mix of you know, what do I want my demographics of my event to be like? Do I want to be focused on a certain aspect in aviation or in our industry? What do I, you know, how big do I want my overall show to be? Do I want it to be the size of Brett's? Do I want to scale it down? Do I want to, you know, I think that's initially where I'm looking is, you know, exactly what do I want to have, and then where do I go next? Who can I bring in to, you know, to help support this event?
Chris, are you with us?
Yeah, and what I would add in is that, you know, in addition to what Sean is saying there, I think I'm going to look for what's the pathway to excellence in the event. And I'm going to define excellence as doing the best you can with what you have. So part of it is a realism check to say, who's involved? Who do we have in the airport community and the leadership community that we can pull to participate in it? Some of that's going to be related to funding. How do we fund it? Are there sponsors locally? Are there resources available? But then looking for leadership teams and the planning processes that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. So, you know, looking at airport capacity, looking at the personnel, the leadership, that, you know, the buy-in from the airport leadership, whether it be your airport commission, the board, the county, the city, whoever is the ownership pool there, and resources that might be available through online or on-field groups that might participate, EAA, Civil Air Patrol, flying clubs, associations, flight schools, et cetera. So looking at the comprehensive picture of who all do we have to come to the table that will get excited about the event, that will put some time and energy into it, And then what are the resources in play to do it both efficiently, effectively, as well as safely?
All right, thank you, Chris. I'm going to provide some insight because I get approached, on an annual basis for new events. And I'm always looking at the aspect of why am I doing it? Why am I going to have this event at my airport, whether it's an aeronautical event or a non-aeronautical event? And so let me take my most recent case that I was approached with is the American Cancer Society. Why am I going to have the American Cancer Society at my airport? What benefits are there for the airport? So for the air show, I'm inviting, that's always our single biggest link to our community because we're just a small airport, relatively not much going on. I mean, we got a lot going on aeronautically, but where we reach out to the community, there just isn't much. So the air show is already my single biggest link. When I brought in the car show, it was like, well, there's all these local people in our community that belong to these car clubs, and I want to get them into the fence. I want to expose them to aviation. So I have a whole different demographic that I brought in and exposed them to the airport and being a positive asset for the community. And then American Cancer Society, it's more of the affluent people in town that are coming and sponsoring the American Cancer Society. So I'm reaching out and I'm touching these demographics. So why is always important. I got to be able to sell the event to my leaders, my electeds, my appointed officials. So why is always critical in everything I do. So we're going to spend a significant amount of our presentation on planning because most of you have heard the 6 Ps. Proper planning prevents, and you can insert whatever word you want in there, performance. Pretty bad, or pretty performance is the clean way to say it. But so all of my events, I spend much of my time in planning. Same thing when I was doing here for the chair position. All of our effort was in the planning effort, so when I get to the day of the event, I'm not having to stress out about the little decisions. I should have mapped that all out and figured it all out before we got to the event. So before we go further, I want to expose some of the crowd to the different types of events, because even going through, when we were preparing this presentation, we were wrapping our brains around, like, what are the various aeronautical events that we can have? So let's start with Chris. You want to give some insight into some of the events that you're familiar with?
Yeah, for sure. So we already talked about things like Wings and Wheels or 5Ks on the runway or things like that are events that are not entirely aviation centric, but they would be things that would attract a general public event. There are some challenges there related to the FAA being sure that they're happy with the plans to have a non-aeronautical event at the field. Then there's your smaller type fly-ins. This could be an EAA pancake breakfast, or AOPA often will do things like a rusty pilot session or so forth, where there's an event or a subject matter that really is a small event. We're going to draw a handful of folks to be there. There's the large scale fly-ins, like AOPA produces our AOPA fly-ins, the big hundreds of aircraft and those types of things. There are probably some other associations and groups that would be doing mid to large size events. I'm thinking of Copper State out there in the Southwest, other groups like that. They're going to do those types of things. Short takeoff and landing demonstration or competitions, STOL competitions are kind of a new thing in the industry that are pretty big and pretty exciting. And then it goes all the way up through your larger air show type stuff that Brett and Sean would have a little bit more expertise in.
Sean?
There we go. In addition to our annual large-scale airport event that we have in October, for the past several years, in May we've had the Collins Foundation that would come out as part of their Wings of Freedom tour. So set up for several days. They'd be offering rides in their aircraft. They would provide static displays. So we open up a part of our ramp for them to come, charging a small admission fee. We also have aircraft, local aircraft display days on certain weekends that we partner with our local pilot community and chapters of several groups. So some pilots will come on out and display their aircraft, vintage aircraft, get the public out. We also have several, our EAA chapter has several events throughout the year. And then also on kind of a really local, small scale for our airport is, in order to fundraise for our open house and air show, we have what is called Hot Dog Thursdays. So it's every Thursday, 8 or 9 months out of the year, and I'm sure my staff are shaking their heads at me right now through the camera, wanting to correct me, but that's usually internal in our airport community, as well as we outreach to our local city departments to come on out, take a look at the airport, and help us raise funds for our big marquee event.
So we were thumbing through some of the slides of all the events that we were coming up with, and the quintessential event would be obviously the air show. That's what most people want, that they strive to do. So there's your California International Air Show with the Thunderbirds flying through. And then this was, this picture here is a picture that I took, you can see it's all cropped up. This is about 10 different pictures that I stitched together from our drone. This was before the air show. So you can see this is actually before the air show even began on a Sunday morning. And so these were just the assets and infrastructure that was out on the airfield. So this is a basic event planning model where you plan the event, and after you plan it, you staff the event, train the plan, practice the plan, review and adjust the plan. And so we're going to be talking about this this model, and this is how we actually work our events. Is it not close enough? I'm going to make sure I look back at Cole now. Got to have it closer. So this is how we work our events, where we actually work through these models every year and every event. What are the actual needs of the event? And so this is also something that we live and die by, and probably most of you live and die by. And this is a great Dwight Eisenhower quote that says, "In preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." So what I want to ask the panel up here is, it's kind of a three-part question. How does this quote resonate with you and your operation? How does your how does your organization plan for events? Is there a routine, written documents, tools that you use? And if you have plans, how do you ensure those plans are relevant and exercised? And you can kind of just roll right into those. And so let's start with Sean, and then we'll go on to Chris.
So for me, this quote resonates pretty well, that through any type of event, in my background of being a duty manager and working at small airports, the plan is as good as it is to be fluid and flexible. You need to plan for both that your event can go off without a hitch, but you also need to have plans in place and a plan together on how to adjust course and work to correct and mitigate any issues that may come up. You need to have a plan for if you're having an air show and something as small as a lost kid comes up to you, how are you going to plan to try and reunite them with their family or take them to a safe and secure meeting place, all the way up to, God forbid, you're in the middle of your air show and you have a full-scale aircraft accident. Your plan needs to be flexible and scalable for the type of event. For our organization, how we plan, we kick off early in the year, so we're about to start our planning for our next open house here in a couple of weeks. And we bring in all stakeholders. We bring in all of our pilot groups, all of our local aviation chapters. We bring in our police. We bring in our fire, city and executive leadership team come in, our public safety groups, and we all sit down and take a look at what do we want our event to look like, what's the type of air show that we want to have, and how are we going to take any lessons learned from previous years, incorporate that into the following year to again ensure a smooth and successful event for all involved. and with our plans to make sure that they're relevant and exercised. We constantly review them. About 2 weeks before our airport event, we all get together and we kind of do a tabletop. We'll role play any kind of events. We usually key in our air boss that we have, either remotely or live, to come in and talk about their role. But even throughout that, we're constantly evaluating our plans, and if there's any changes in our staff structure, any changes in our leadership, or anybody who's involved, we're making sure that any new personnel that are coming in are well briefed and kept informed of what the airport's intentions are for the event, and if they have any other perspectives that they want to spin on it, because I only have 2 sets of eyes and I'm only looking at a document one way, but another person may have and may see another opportunity that could provide for a better and more well-exercised event.
Chris?
Yeah, so I would add to what Sean is talking about there. I think all great points, and we do very similar things to what he's recommended there. I'd add just a couple other thoughts. I think that quote from Dwight Eisenhower is profound, and I think we know that about planning anything. I tend to think of a phrase I often use with our team is Semper Gumby. The Marines have Semper Fi as their motto. Ours is Semper Gumby. Always be flexible, always be scrappy. The ability to you make your plan, but realize that most of it is going to have challenges that are going to take it outside the box of what you strategize for. So oftentimes we're trying to have additional layers of backup plans in place. And one of the things I've often said is the most successful event planners are going to be people who get really good at looking for and forecasting potential problems, looking for a dozen different things that could go wrong with each of our core planning components. So some of that is, of course, at the real high level that Sean talked about there in terms of emergency preparedness, safety, those kinds of things. But then it can also be all the way down through the simplest of things, that if there's a parking problem or there's some kind of signage issue or so forth. One of the things I think is real important, I talked about 3 Ps that are most important for event planning, and it's the mindset of where the person is coming from, the attendees coming from. If they can do 3 things and do them well, the content of your show can be relatively mediocre, and they're going to think it was still fun. If they can't do these 3 things well, you could have the most amazing program, and they're going to walk away frustrated. And the 3 things, and forgive me, one's a little crass here, but number 1, you got to be able to park your car. Number 2, you got to be able to pee. And number 3, you got to be able to pig out. So if they can park and they can find a restroom and they can eat good food, everything else, it can be, mediocre, and they're still going to say, okay, that was a good event. If their human needs are not met, they're really going to struggle. So the other thing I would say about in terms of how we prepare and how we plan is to have a really robust checklist. So I believe Brett may have a copy of the checklist that we use at AOPA. It literally has 800 lines to it. And we're all pilots and we like to fly without checklists, but we realize how important it is to fly with a checklist. So we put together a very robust list of 800 different components, all the way down to the finest of details to be sure everything's been covered. Do we have all the right permits? Do we have the porta potties? Do we have radios to talk to each other? Do we have a parking plan mapped out? All these various things. Yeah, and you're showing it there on screen that it's we just built a basic Excel spreadsheet that goes through various functions, both long-term and advanced, so several months of planning. And then what he has there on the screen right now is the actual minute by minute that we would do during production week, the 3 or 4 days leading up to the event. And then the actual event itself, we go down to minute by minute, the sequence things have to happen, the interdependencies that are involved. And we really found that if you build a good checklist and you have all the right content on that, it takes a lot of that stress out, a lot of those sleepless nights that are in the run-up before an event where your brain is trying to say, well, did I remember everything? If you know you've got a good checklist in mind and you just work the process, I don't have to worry about the details on tomorrow's checklist. If I just focus on what's today, I know I've got it written down for tomorrow. If you have it all sequenced and interdependencies built properly, that's really helpful. And Brett's more than welcome to share that Excel sheet with you guys if any of you are interested. I think he may have some either hard copies or he can email you the electronic copy. We'd love for you to have that. And you think about the 800 points, that's for a major event. You may not have all those factored. You can cross off on your list saying, well, we don't need to worry about this or that. But at least it's a way to think about comprehensively the various details that you need to get thought through in your plan.
Thank you, Chris. And so we have some hard copies for anyone that's interested. We have some up here, and we have some in the back behind Bob Trimborn on the table back there. And then if you want an electronic copy, I have that I can email to you. This list has become more robust over the years. I remember when they came in 2015, I felt it was about half this size as they were getting going and planning these AOPA events. But this is a great tool to make you think about, all right, what are all the steps that I got to do to put on an event and timetables from. But keep in mind that this is for mostly a regional type fly-in. So there are some things that could be added, but I mean, it is certainly a starting point. I know I'm much better taking something and modifying it versus coming up with it from scratch. And I guess if I'm that way, there's probably a lot of you out there that are the same. So.
And Brett, if I could add, throw a point in on that. So, you know, we've talked about, we were doing our pre-discussion on this, that stuff that would be on a major show's checklist. So an air show or a big fly-in like this, we divide and conquer amongst a very large leadership team, but it could be that in a small event, like even an EA pancake breakfast or something small like that, you know, you might have 50% of these items that still need to be done, but they're much easier to accomplish because they're small and simplistic. And, you know, instead of a big event permit you got to fill out, you just need to send an email to your airport commissioner and let them know, hey, we're doing this thing, or so forth. But the concept behind each of these items becomes critical to be sure you've thought through who needs to be contacted, what types of things do we need to procure, et cetera.
All right, I'm going to primarily direct this question to Chris, because Chris is an event planner, pretty much his daily duties. I know that there's a lot of things that other things he does, many hats that he wears. But what do you feel are the personality traits to be a successful event planner? Because that's what we're doing. We're planning events. And so what insights do you have as to what you would need to be a successful event planner?
So I think, as already mentioned, the idea of someone who is a critical thinker, who almost in a sense can have a negative view of the world, to kind of be that nitpicker of what could go wrong, and to think through all those dynamics in advance, come up with that list of contingencies and so forth. That's an important person. Obviously, they need to be organized. They need to be able to self-organize and self-manage, but then also be able to inspire people on your team. And your team is going to be a broad group of people that are going to be supportive to helping you execute the events. You're going to need leadership that able to function at a really high technical level on certain technical expertise, airside operations, public safety, or those types of things. You're going to need some people who are highly talented in the hospitality side to think through with you. How do we put the right signage in place? How do we put the right guidance for people to know what to expect and where to go and where to find things? And then you're going to need folks that are really just happy doing the grunt work, the stuff that's not glorious, helping park automobiles or handling trash services, or a lot of the heavy lift of setup and tear down of, putting up barricades and tables and chairs and so forth. Those are kind of the non-glorious things about an event. And you need a good crew of folks to do that. And it could be a wide range between, full-time employees, part-time employees, committee chair folks that maybe are kind of your super volunteers that are going to really put in a heavy lift with you. And then just ordinary Jane and Joe type volunteers will come in and put a few hours towards it. So you're able to build a comprehensive group of folks that will support you. And then probably a final thought would be also to have the political savvy to be able to negotiate with the important players that are going to be your superiors, so your airport commission, your mayor, county council, whatever that might be, public safety, some of those officials that are going to need to be supportive of you producing the event. And then if you have a financial sponsorship, the ability to connect with potential sponsors, make introductions to important folks that can help you think through those financial opportunities.
All right, we have a few minutes left, about 10 minutes left, before I wanted to get into questions, because I'm sure that there's questions that you're going to have that maybe we didn't address. And so let's talk about some showstoppers. What are some things out there that might be a showstopper for any particular event? Could be a fly-in, air show. And so let's start with Sean, then we'll go over to Chris. Showstoppers.
Well, the first one I can think of is weather. and it kind of goes back to planning. I know that for Livermore and AOPA, we had quite an intense back and forth, very thorough discussion on the date that we wanted to hold our event. There was some discussion, and even through our city, they wanted to have it more earlier towards the year, towards in the middle, and then some want it towards to the later of the year. Earlier, we were concerned just for weather in the Bay Area, rain. We'd be getting right out of the rainy season. If we had it in the middle of the summer, if anybody out here is familiar with Livermore Tri-Valley in the summer, it's usually a nice, comfortable 100+ degrees on certain days. And when you're having several thousand people on a hot ramp on a summer's weekend, it would be pretty uncomfortable. So we kind of picked I think it was the second or third weekend in June, where we thought, okay, this is gonna be good weather. And I think it was the Friday of the event, Chris. I'd stayed locally just so I could be near my airport in case something happened, and woke up, opened up the window, and I couldn't even see my car in the parking lot. We were completely socked in. And I thought, well, if I can't see my car and we're about to open up the airport and the tower and the airspace for several hundred airplanes, well, this is going to be really interesting. So weather definitely kind of put a little bit of a delay in our show, but to me, when someone's talking about an airport event, I'm immediately at first looking at, will the weather cooperate? Will we have any issues?
Chris?
All right, so I'd chime actually probably a handful of things that we need to consider. So weather, obviously, of course, you're looking there for your best patterns. Obviously, you can't control, but you want to find the best likelihood in the time of year the patterns are going to be. Obvious things, safety concerns, you want to look at that. I think another showstopper might be permits. If you don't think through properly what permits are needed, and talk with your city or county officials to be sure you got all the right permitting in place, that can be a showstopper. We actually had an event in Minnesota one time where we were told we didn't need a permit for the particular event we were doing. And about 2 hours before the event, the sheriff pulls in and says, you can't do this without a permit. Now, thankfully, he was super thankful, or super helpful. And perhaps the tears of my staff member who broke down in front of him, he literally drove her over to the county office and got a permit rush through, 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, which is really unheard of. But if you don't have that, you thought you didn't need a permit and you don't get one, that's going to be a real issue. Some other showstoppers might be date conflicts with other events in the area that you don't trump over somebody else's event that's maybe even 50 miles away or 100 miles away that is also in the aviation space. And, we had in Livermore, we were concerned about the 52nd annual Father's Day fly-in at a local airport nearby. And so we moved our event actually a weekend off of when we really wanted to do it, just to be a good neighbor to that other event. And then finally, I think another showstopper would be any existing airport operation considerations. So if you plan an event that's going to take some portion of the airfield and take it out of its normal operating cycles, you really need to understand the impact on the tenants, the other businesses, or other transient customers, so you don't create a bad experience for the businesses on your airfield. The worst thing in the world is if you hold this event, it's fantastic, the general public loves it, the local recreational pilot community loves it, but you've ended up making it financially a disaster for a flight school or a maintenance shop on the airfield or so forth. So we try really hard to understand what are the existing operational needs for your businesses to stay in operation throughout the event weekend. We may have to make some special adjustments, or may have to ask them, hey, can we do things differently than you normally do? But we're going to be sure that you stay open and in business, and you can handle all the normal transactions and customers you normally would have. That's a real critical thing for any airport event.
I also want to touch in, especially for those of us that are doing air shows, the waivers, working with the FAA, because if you don't get that waiver, you don't get a show. They won't allow it to happen. So one of the best things to do is, as you're planning, day one, meet with your team to say, we want to have an air show. Day two, start working on your air show waiver form. I know I have a lot of experience, in my 2 years. I think for the 2 shows that I've done, I've made at least 10 changes to my 7711 form. Whether or not an act is canceled, changed airplanes, changed a part of their routine. It's very important to keep on top of your partners with the FAA, because they are definitely one that if there's going to be a compromise, they'll definitely put a stop on the show for the interest of safety.
All right, I'm going to combine two of our questions for the panel. One of them was on teams and scaling. So as you respond to this, think how you can combine both those questions together. Logistically, we need to be able to put on an air show, and so you need boots on the ground to be able to do it. So I'd like to talk about those logistics and those teams that I think there's a lot of commonalities between how our air show does it, how AOPA does it, how Livermore does it. So let's dive into some of the various teams that we'd put together for putting that together, putting an air show on.
So for Livermore, scaling it to a smaller event for just a one-day weekend event, kind of what I'm looking for in developing the teams is knowing where my resources are and how I can best use them. When we get our volunteers, seeing who's experienced, with our pilot community, who's experienced to help, kind of assist with our aircraft marshaling and parking on the day of or the day before. For those that are, that have handled it before and that are good kind of on the ground and the ground transportation aspect, where can I use my volunteers to assist with parking control, crowd control? Are we crossing pedestrians over a busy street? Can I use any of my local city resources to incorporate into my team, the local police volunteers or the police explorers as we call them? Just again, because at a small airport we have a limited number of human capital resources. So how can I best pair the traits and talents of one person to 1, 2, 3, or 4 different teams or team requirements for specific jobs?
Chris?
Yeah, very similar to Sean. We're looking for places where we can utilize local officials to help. So again, bringing in some of the experts, public safety, public works, some of those types of organizations that we try to bring in from a city level to help us. One of the major factors that we found is the setup and tear down processes are some of the heaviest workload, some of the least glorious stuff. So setting up all the fencing and so forth, where you're going to use outside contractors like porta potties or food vendors or so forth. Typically they can do their own setup, but there are things that the airport has to do to prepare the grounds and resources to get the airfield set up and ready to park automobiles in non-standard locations or have crowd line fencing or so forth. So those are all places where we've actually had a lot of luck with either public works in a local community or parks and recs. We've even sometimes gotten outside the box. In a couple locations, we've found that the local probation office is really happy for work release prisoners to come out and help set up and tear down stuff. It gives the probation office a good thing for those guys to do. And then also those incarcerated folks, they just love the idea of getting out and being outside and so forth. So it's been a neat partnership we've had in a couple of municipalities that have let us tap into some of those resources. So you're thinking outside the box on that. Also, we often look for groups that maybe teams or so forth that might already exist, whether it be a local Lions Club or one of those social service groups, or even sometimes like a local high school soccer team or something like that, where Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, where we could trade maybe a little fundraising opportunity for them. For example, help us park our automobiles, run a parking lot for us, and we'll give you $1 per car, as a fundraising opportunity for that. And we've had some sports teams take us up on that and love that idea. Give them a chance to get their athletes out there and do some community service, but also build a little bit of resource to help with their program. So we're looking for the creative ways that we can mobilize people into a volunteer role, that we can do this with a small staff. You think about our AOPA, we're producing anywhere between 20 to 50 major events a year around the country. Some of them really large scale, about a half dozen that are really large scale in the 10,000 person range. We've only got 6 people that do that. Now that is our full-time job, so we're able to do that kind of scale. But oftentimes we're going to airports to produce a major event where maybe it's just, a full-time airport manager and a part-time ops person. We've even done a fly-in, a major multi-thousand-person fly-in, where literally the only staff member at the airport was a part-time airport manager. And so sometimes we're dealing with a lot of, where there's not a lot of resource at the airport to do this. So we've got to rely on building relationships with community groups that want to get involved and help us put this on.
Thank you, Chris. Can you go back to the PowerPoint slide? So at my airport, and I'm going to show you an organizational chart here in a minute, what our org chart looks like for the Airshow Association. I took some of the committees and other areas, and I tried putting more general terms on the teams. And so I want to go through some of the teams that would be representative of something that you might want to consider at your event. So there should be a team that's focused on safety. And so this is one person or a few people. And I'll get into the scalability in a minute. So, but they're responsible for the safety and security plan, that they're the liaison with the emergency services, so between like Salinas Fire, Salinas Police, that they have response for walkie-talkies and communications, and who takes control under different situations. So whether it's an airport accident, incident, event evacuation plan, or lockdown plan. So this is the first team, team safety. I didn't put administration in there. Administration is more who's going to be responsible overall for if it's an association that's putting on or some sort of committee that's putting on your event. There's the whole administrative side, and I just skipped that, I think, on this presentation. Airside operations. So you should have a team dedicated that's part of the air boss team if you're going to have someone. If you're an uncontrolled airfield and you want to provide advisories to the pilots that are coming in, you have an air boss. Or if your air traffic control tower isn't functional during a waiver period, you have an air boss to do that. The air boss is also responsible for working with airport operations administration for filing the waiver, getting the specific TFR information in place. Airside operations is responsible for performers, if you're going to have performers, or working with the people that are flying in. If you're having an air show, the airside operations is going to be responsible for the air show box, the ingress, egress, markers, and then providing the day of weather briefings and inspections for the event. The next team that we came up with was facilities. So you're going to have to bring infrastructure in probably for your event, whether you're erecting tents or pop-ups or porta potties, fencing. That's what facilities is responsible for. So for our air show, we're bringing in 30,000 square feet of tent structure. We have over 2,000 linear feet of fencing that we're putting up. So a team dedicated just for facilities. Refuse, rope, information booth, and always first aid stations. So they would set that up and coordinate that with safety. The other team that we have is concessions. So if you're going to be selling food or other like air show toys, they're going to be responsible for this. Working with the vendors, the applications, permits, health and safety. That's what concessions is doing. And here's what I wanted to talk about scaling. So this is our air show, and I know it's very tough to see. We have handouts in the back if you want to see what the organization looks like. But the orange that you see up on the screen are directors. So they are responsible for one area. So up here we have transportation, sponsorship, security, membership, marketing, hospitality, and we go down the line. So one person that's dedicated as being a board member for that area. And then the gray areas are committee chairs, and they're all different. They don't, for our air show, they don't cross over. You have one responsibility, and that's what you're doing. So under security, for example, there's one person that's responsible for jet team, emergency, and so on down the line. So just dedicated people for being responsible for an area. We have over 50 people that are responsible, that we have to have 50 people just to get off the ground going, volunteers that are dedicated. And our events, we start about 8 months in advance, planning. Once a month, the board of directors is getting together, and then once a month, the board of directors is getting together with their committees. And so these folks are in it for the long haul for our air shows, so you're asking for significant time commitments from these people. Our air show runs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and so they're out there 16 hours a day during the event, and so that's time away from their family, friends, and life that you're asking people to do this. Now on scalability, this is just our air show, but you primarily have to follow those same functions if you're doing an open house, but the big difference is one person is doing 3, 4, 5, 6 of those responsibilities for a smaller air show because you just don't need that many people to do it. So the point of this is, if you're considering, going back to that first question, Brett was able to put on that California International Air Show, and I want to do the same thing, you have to understand the scalability of what you're going to be asking people to commit to from that scalability standpoint, taking people away from their lives to promote the airport or whatnot. So how are we doing on time? We got 3 minutes.
Brett, can I add one thought?
We have some canned questions, or if you so choose, do you have questions? We have a couple questions here. Mark Witso, I saw Mark's hand come up like 3 minutes into the presentation.
So this has been a great presentation, and it seems familiar to my past experience. It does seem like there could be a lot of money flowing between the airport organization, between nonprofits, between service providers. Some public agencies can be very particular about who gets what money and how, and procurement processes. So can you say a little bit about that? And sometimes I remember having a charitable organization, having another nonprofit committee that actually puts on the air show, partly was because it's easier for them to both earn money and spend money than the airport agency itself.
You guys want me to take it?
Yeah, for a question like that, I should have brought my one of my staff members, Angela, to this session, not me. So it's all you. She's the expert on that one.
So, is this on? You can hear me? For our air show, it's set up as an association. Yearly, it kind of ebb and flows whether we're sponsoring the air show or not. We used to contribute $20,000 to the air show, and that was primarily to offset fire services. So it was an in-kind donation. So the money actually never went to the association. It went straight to the fire department's payroll, and that was our donation. In the last few years, I've cut that back to, well, you guys are making all the money, and we charge you $2,500 to be in here, and this is great for the airport. So we haven't been making that contribution, and the economy's been fairly good, so they've been able to bring more people in. From the money side, we don't touch any of the money. It's all the association that raises the money. It's the association that works with the nonprofits and exchanges, you know, whether they're going to make contributions for services. And so it's a very clean way to do it. In fact, if our association went away, I probably wouldn't put on the air show because it would be very difficult for us to have, one, the capacity to do it. I don't have access. I'd really have to dive deep to find the access for 50 to 60 people dedicated to put on the air show. So that's our take on how we handle it. Maybe Chris, do you have any other perspective on the money side of it?
You know, for us, we're funding our events, but we do generate a lot of sponsorship. That's a big ticket item for us. And so, two ways that we seek sponsorship: one is the cash sponsors that can actually give money to the event that in return for marketing assets, and the other way is in-kind donations. And we've heard a little bit of that talked about. Even Brett talked about fire services and so forth. When your local municipalities can understand, recognize the value of the event to the local economy, to the local communities' sense of connectivity to the airport, so forth. If you can get your government officials and maybe even some local businesses to say, we'll donate equipment, we'll donate people, we'll donate time, all of those things, if you don't have to pay for it commercially, you can procure it either through a donation or donated time. That helps a lot. And then at the end of the day, you've just got to have some entity that's going to be the bookkeeper. You know, for us, AOPA would be the bookkeeper, and we take sponsor money in and we write the checks. For an airport, it may be like you're describing. It's going to be the, you know, an LLC that's formed, or some other type of organization that's formed, a committee that's formed that can handle that resource. Or sometimes it's going to be the airport budget itself that will funnel that through. It just depends on what your rules are going to be.
I think we
The
have
local airport.
one more question so we can move on with the next presentation.
Yes, thank you. Gary Curcio, Monterey board member. Thanks for a great presentation. Really very, very well done. I have one comment and one question.
Here, you can use this one.
Thank you. I have one comment and one question. The comment is that really the most important thing for any event planner is attention to detail. Tremendously important, no matter what type of event you're running. I have a question on the Salinas upcoming auto show. I'm assuming that I think you said that's during Car Week in August?
It's right before Car Week.
So is it an event that's open to the public? Do you charge for that event?
Yes, the car club does charge for that event, somewhere around $20, I think, to get in. But it's not associated with Car Week. It's just a separate event.
So is it, and I'm just interested because we're here, is it the week prior to Car Week or early in the week of Car Week? Do you know what the date is?
Early, it's 7th, I think, August 7th.
Okay, so that's like right before.
Yep.
Very good. All right, thank you.
So we did have a slide, and we just didn't talk about it. Well, we talked a little bit about it, the event planner, and you're exactly right. For event planner, characteristics would be that you're flexible. Something else is our attention to detail, flexible. You got to have motivation if you're going to do it, because if you're planning one of these events and you don't have the motivation and you're not flexible, you need to be innovative if you're putting on one of these events, because the times are always changing, and if you're doing exactly what you did last year, people have already seen it, and they're going to move on to something else. So with that, I think close off comments, and we need to roll into the next session, airport emergencies, I think. Thank you, Chris.
Great to be with you guys. Thank you.
All right, so we're about to roll into our next session, emergency preparedness, and after that we will have a short break with our exhibitors. As we're rolling into the next session, we'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsors for emergency preparedness. We have SP Plus Bags and Morrison Merrily. So when you can, please give them a round of applause. And again, thank all of our sponsors for their support.